A brutal week for the New York Rangers and Winnipeg Jets, but a great week for the Flyers and Kings. How did it cause our power rankings to shake up here 8 weeks into the season? Let's jump right into it and start at the bottom, hanging on to respectability, but the Chicago Blackhawks have dropped down below the ass tier into their own giga ass tier. An impressive win last week over the Dallas Stars and a close loss to the Minnesota Wild, but they got trounced by the Columbus Blue Jackets and Toronto Maple Leafs. And quite frankly, the other teams in the ass tier just quite frankly had better weeks. So the cheese stands alone, and for the Chicago Blackhawks, it is a big stinky cheese as they are down at the bottom of the tier list. And speaking of that ass tier, right above them, unchanged, the Ducks, Blue Jackets, Canadiens, and Sharks, all at that bottom tier. Not really much to say about any of those teams. No big movement amongst any of them. Their seasons are all but over before Christmas has even come. The Nashville Predators, one tier above them in their own pathetic tier. Another particularly galling week for the Predators, who lost 3 straight games in overtime. For most competitive teams, that would be a real kick in the nars, but for the Predators, it's one of their best weeks of the year because they at least got points out of every single game. Right above the Predators, we have 4 teams in the bad tier, which are the Ottawa Senators, Pittsburgh Penguins, Seattle Kraken, and Detroit Red Wings. I'm a little bit higher still on Ottawa than everybody else, considering points-wise they are at the bottom of the standings. I believe in the talent, but only in so much as I don't think that they are complete ass like some of the teams at the bottom. Above those teams, in the mid-tier, we have the Islanders, Blues, Utah Hockey Club, and Buffalo Sabres, all teams that were in that mid-tier before. None of them have really separated themselves or done anything of note last week, other than maybe the Islanders, who just continue to blow leads like they're Sophie Rain. And then we have a new team in the still don't trust them tier, along with the Calgary Flames. The biggest jump of the week belongs to the Philadelphia Flyers, 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, and the Flyers went 3-0-0 in their last week, which included a win over the New York Rangers. However, their margin for victory in all 3 games was just 4 goals. Their wins over Nashville and St. Louis both came in overtime, and they still have a -10 goal differential on the year. So while they are technically fighting for a wild card spot, I'm going to need to see a lot more out of Philly before I put them in the legitimate playoff team conversation, but still a very good week for the Fly Guys. Above them, we have the good not great tier consisting of the Canucks, Vegas Golden Knights, Avalanche, the LA Kings, and the Boston Bruins. The Bruins have gotten a big bump since Joe Sacco took over for Jim Montgomery, but the LA Kings had the best week of anybody in this tier, going 3-0 on the week with a win over Winnipeg, as well as taking care of business against Anaheim, albeit 2-1, a close game, and Ottawa. They did really well against Winnipeg, and they are currently second in the Pacific Division behind Vegas. Talent-wise, I don't know if they can hold off Edmonton and Vancouver behind them for one of the top 3 spots in the division. I think they'll end up as a wild card, but they're still a very solid team, which is more than can be said about the New York Rangers, who had the worst week of anybody on this list, and they are in their own fell off a cliff tier. What really can you say about the New York Rangers? They're 1-6 over their past 7 games. They got that one win last week with a narrow 4-3 victory over the Montreal Canadiens, but they also lost to Carolina, Philadelphia, and then got dummied by the New Jersey Devils last night. Everything is going wrong for this team, and they are quickly slipping out of the upper echelons of the East. They were once upon a time one of my elite teams, but right now they are just completely floundering. But they're still not quite at a spitting distance of the contenders tier, which includes the Washington Capitals, Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Toronto Maple Leafs. Florida Panthers had a really nice week, all over top teams in the Eastern Conference, 2 over Carolina and 1 over Toronto. The Panthers have been really up and down these last few weeks. As you might recall, last week was a really bad one in Sunrise, but luckily the defending champs have managed to rebound. One more team in their own tier, the Minnesota Wild, who are the top team in the NHL when it comes to points and point percentage. But the major reason I don't have them in the elite tier remains the same. They feast on really bad teams. Take a look at last week. They beat Buffalo, Chicago, and Nashville in overtime, all 1-goal games. Does not inspire me to put them among the elite. And speaking of the elite, that is our last tier, as Winnipeg's bad week has dropped them out of the juggernaut tier. They joined Dallas, Edmonton, Carolina, and New Jersey. A lot of people will raise eyebrows at seeing Edmonton up there, but they are one of the hottest teams in the NHL over the last month after a terrible start. I believe in that talent. Dallas as well. I think they've had a pretty tough schedule, and they've done well despite it. Winnipeg had a bad week. They played some very good teams, including Dallas, Vegas, and the LA Kings. They lost all 3 games, which is understandable, but for a team that I thought was clear-cut above the rest in the NHL, you would expect them to get at least 1 win out of those 3. 3, and if they really wanted to show themselves, get 2 or even 3 wins or get points in all of the games. They did not, so for right now, I cannot have Winnipeg on their own tier. I still believe they're elite, they're one of the best teams in the league, but I'm not as confident picking them against the rest of the NHL as I would have been a week or 2 ago.